Hi, today we're going to talk about inheritance. This is the second video on inheritance. So I have written an inheritance program. I'm going to open it up, clicking on Visual Studio, and I am going to click on this inheritance example. Classes, remember you have the declaration, which is the H file, and you see under header files we have all these H files. And the CPP files with the same name as the declaration is a definition. So we can see we have military_member.cpp. We expect to see military_member.h. Person.h, we expect to see person.cpp, and so on. Notice we have inheritance example.cpp. This is the main program. So what I'm going to do is open all these up. I'm going to control click all these, except for that one. I don't need that one. And student, person, military. So I'm going to open all these up. I'm going to right click and click open. Now I have all my files here. So I got military_member.h, military_member.cpp, student.h, student.cpp, person.h, and person.cpp. And I should have inheritance example, which for some reason is not here, so let's open that one up too. Okay, now we have all the programs. Inheritance example is main. So with inheritance, this example for the inheritance, we're going to talk about a person. A person is very basic information about a person. So in this example, this person has two different constructors. One is a default constructor, and the other sets the name, the sex, and the social security number. And then we have getters and setters, or mutators and accessors, to set the name, sex, and social security number. And we have a print person, which prints out the current contents of the data in this person. So here's our private data here. So we can think of this as every person in society is going to have these attributes. So this is the parent class, or this is the base class. Then students, you could think they're also people. So we're going to have a student class, a derived class, based off person. So you specify this by saying class student public person. So I am a student, but I'm derived from person. So we have a student constructor, which is a default constructor. We have set major, set student ID, and print person. Here is the only private data, major and student ID. And notice print person is identical to print person in person.cpp. We have a print person in CPP too. So this is called overriding, and you should have already watched the video on overriding. But in in student.cpp, we are overriding print person.cpp. However, we want to print out the data of a person and only include the data of the student. So we're going to use scope resolution here. We're going to call the person class and call print person from the person class. Then we're going to print out our student information. And we also have military member. So a military member has a constructor and set branch, set rank, and print service member. Notice this is not overriding, but the only private data for this derived class is branch and rank. If we look at military_member.cpp, we have all our mutators, and we have our constructor up here, and we have the print person accessor. Now let's look at, is it person.cpp? Okay, look at this carefully. Here is the person.cpp. Remember what this does. This, with the arrow, says look at the private data of this person, of the person class. And you should find first name. So if we jump back here to person, we have sex, first name, last name, and social. But we can have ambiguity here. Notice I do not have this in front of these. So I'm going to run this program and let's see what happens. I'm pressing Control F5. And notice the sex of this person is whatever that symbol is. So it's a symbol. So something went wrong here. So we have first name, last name without the this. Well, sex right here is a private data from person, but sex is also passed in. So there's an ambiguity there. So to remove all ambiguity, you should always use this arrow, and I'm just going to cut and paste this. I'm going to copy this and paste it here and paste it here and here. Now I'm going to run the program and the ambiguity is now gone. Everything should look okay. Let's see the program run, and sex is M. If we look at what this military member is, how we instantiate the military member was declared a male. One thing that you might find useful is we can create multiple windows here. I like to create one window, or split this window up, my edit window, into two, and have all my H files on one side and my CPP files on the other. So I'm going to pull this and select it here. So now I have person.h here. Now I'm going to drag military.h, if I can grab it, drag it over here and put it on here. And the same with student. So now I have my H files over here and my CPP files over here. It could be possibly advantageous to do this when you're editing, because you can see your H file, your header file. We're looking at student. Here is our definition, and here's our declaration. So we can bounce back and forth to make sure we've included everything. Remember, this is a default constructor. In this constructor, I am not setting any data. The purpose of a default constructor is to set all the identifying information of this class. So really, the default constructor should look more like this. Let's just say student ID equals, I'm going to copy this, put it up here, and major, I'm going to copy this and put it up here. Now, ID, well, this is a, what is ID? Let's look over here. It is a integer. So, what is the ID? Let's just make it 0 because we haven't set it up yet. Major, a good default for major would be the empty string. So that is this. So student ID, let's set to 0 for the default, and major let's set to the empty string. Now let's look at inheritance example. So we call military member and we pass all this information. Now let's look at this. Air Force in private, That's part of military member, but John military, M, and the social security number is part of person. So how do we do that? Let's look at military member. And all we do is we specify all the variables we're passing in. So branch, rank, first name, last name, sex, and social. But we are forwarding the first name, last name, sex, and social to person. So in instantiating military member, we first instantiate person, and then we set the military member's private data, as we do here. So let's say we want to add a subclass or a derived class. What I'd do is I'd click Source Files, right click, and I'd click on Class Wizard. If you're using C-Line, it's similar but not identical. So you can try that by yourself using C-Line if you like. I'm going to click on Add Class because I want to click on Create a new class. Let's create an instructor class. And remember, all classes are capitalized to distinguish from variables. And we're going to have a base class. We're going to have the base class of person. And I want to create the declaration and the definition all at once. So when I click OK, I'm going to get two new files. So let's see. So we have instructor.h. Let's drag this over here. Now, class instructor is of type public person. So now I can define by class, and when you're defining classes, you should always start with the private data. So private, let's just create something here, a couple things here. The string type, and type will be store either professor or adjunct. And let's say we also want to store credentials. So that'll be a string credentials. So if he has a major or a doctorate. Major or doctorate. Now that we've defined our private data, we can also define our mutators, accessors, and our constructors. But I'm not going to do that because that would take much more time. But right now, if we run, should still run. So let's run the debugger to see the flow of how things work here. We're right before executing this line. What I want to do is step into to see what is happening. So I'm in military member. Now when I step again, I should go into person. Let's do another step into. And let's see what happens. Step into. See, I went into person. Now I'm going to set first name and last name. First name, first name, last name, sex, social, and we're going to go back to military member, and we're going to set branch and rank. So let's step over again, branch and rank, and we'll return now, and now we have military member. If we look at his data, we have person, which is sex. 77, remember, is the ASCII character for M, first name and last name, and some other data here that we don't see yet, but if we expand this, we can see all our information. Here is branch and rank. That's only the private data for military member. Now, if we step over, we're going to use the default constructor here. So let's see what that does. Let's step into. And remember, we have to call the person default, which we should have set up with default data, but we didn't in this case. I'm going to step over and over, and we set the defaults for the student. So when we return, we have a student and we have a person. Sex is whatever it chose to be. That's the only data that it had. That's why you always want to set the values to default data. But we have set up to major, the empty string, and student ID. So we can call our constructors here, and we set the name, set the student, set the sex, set the social, set the major, set the student ID, and we printed out the student information. Let's look here. So we have Mary, female, social, major, and student ID. Let's go back. We're going to print the service member. Let's step over. And let's see, military member printed out. And we're going to return 0. So I'm just going to continue. And this is the end of our program. So this concludes the second video on inheritance.